Hey, also I've got a new RC here. This is a version 3 Talion, the 2018 model. It just so happens that today, the day I'm filming this, Arrma announced its 2019 version. Some things have changed, but primarily it is the same, including the body and the tires, which really kind of define the Talion. I'm going to show this out here on a grass field running, and then I'm going to go over some hop-ups. And the great thing about the hop-ups I'm going to cover are that they are must-have hop-ups, not just for this V3 Talion, but for the brand new Talion released today as well. So as much as Arrma is responding to user feedback, improving the truck, there's always more things you can do and more hop-ups you can put onto these trucks to make them even better. If they had every hop-up in the world, they'd cost a lot of money, and you probably wouldn't like them as much because there wouldn't be anything left to do. So I am going to run this, show you how it works, and then I'm going to show you a couple things I think need improving on this and the V4 version, and I'll show you the parts that I'll be putting on. Okay, here we go. Now I'm running this on a I'm running this on a 4S. I actually haven't run it on 6S yet. I will eventually do that. But for running out here on grass, this is plenty fast. I think it's probably goes about 35 miles an hour, maybe a little bit faster. It's the stock pinion and stock tires, obviously. Stock motor as well. It handles really well. This reminds me a lot of a buggy. In a sense, it is kind of a buggy. They call it a speed truck. It's got that slammed body with slightly taller tires than you'd find on a buggy. It's an interesting combination of a lot of different styles. It's maybe a little bit funny looking, but it is fairly effective. But some of the hop-ups I'm going to make to it include changing the tires out, and we'll see how that affects performance. There's my daughter out there. Don't want to hit her. Really hooks up well. I can feel as I come out of a turn and have it go straight, it really hooks up. Yeah, it really grips. It's super planted, more planted than a truck would be, than a standard truck. So that kind of gives you a sense for what it does, but I'm going to show you some hop-ups I'm going to make to this that will make it more durable and frankly make it look better too. Hey there, I'm back from a quick bash with my brand new Arrma Talion. This is a V3 2018 model, as I mentioned. It just so happens that today, while I'm videoing this, Arrma released, or at least announced, its new 2019 or V4 model. It looks exactly the same on the outside. There are a couple of changes under the hood that mostly improve the durability and do a couple things in terms of improving the maintenance of the Talion. But what I'm going to do is point out a few things that are actually similar between the two trucks and where they could use some hop-ups. And so I've actually arranged a number of hop-ups that I'm going to be putting on this truck. They can be put on either this V3 or the brand new V4. I would say both of them really need it. And I'm going to demonstrate to you what I found in my bashing of this new truck and why I think these relatively inexpensive upgrades are must-haves for the V3 or V4 Talion. Now, before I get into those upgrades, I'm just going to mention a couple of things. This is a 1/8 scale truggy, and I have taken out my other 8 scale vehicles just to show you the difference in size. So what makes a truggy different from, say, a 1/8 scale truck is it's typically a little bit longer. This is my MT410. So obviously I've got some bigger tires on here, but it's actually got a shorter wheelbase than the Talion. So it's going to handle differently. I found the Talion to really handle really well. It hooked up really well. It turns really well, and of course it doesn't flip because it's wide and it's really long. In a sense, it's actually kind of like an oversized buggy. This is an 8 scale buggy. This is actually a Kyosho buggy. And I find that the Talion, although it's called a truggy, with these new changes in the V3 and the V4 Talion that Arrma made, it makes it kind of a good compromise vehicle in between a monster truck and a buggy. It kind of combines the best features of both. It's got the bigger tires, it's got the wider stance of a truck. It's also quite long, but it's really low to the ground like a buggy. So as you can see, this 8-scale buggy is quite a bit shorter, but it has similar proportions because it's also narrower, right? And what's interesting about these D-Boots tires that Arrma uses on the V3 and V4 Talion is that they are kind of like oversized buggy tires. They look a little less like truggy tires than other tires I've seen. So they're a really interesting profile. Now, one of the things I will be changing on this truck is actually moving to a Proline Shockwave tire. And the reason I'm going to be doing that is mostly aesthetics. I think that the profile of this D-Boots tire looks a little funny on a truck this size because it's really just kind of a sized up buggy tire, right? So also it's supposed to be a speed truggy, but these tires aren't actually really any lower than a lot of tires. In fact, they have essentially the same diameter as the Shockwaves. So if you really wanted to get this low to the ground, well, either you use a buggy. Interestingly, the new Typhon is now rated at 70 miles an hour too, just like the Arrma Talion. Or, you know, look, if you wanted to get this low to the ground, you'd use buggy tires, right? So I could bolt on some 8-scale buggy slicks, and I'd get this really low to the ground, and I could really do some speed runs. I think that the tires are kind of an odd compromise, at least in terms of aesthetics, and if you really wanted to do speed runs, you want to get this down as low to the ground as possible. These tires are too high because they're about 6 inches high. So they're kind of an odd tire. I will say they hook up really well on off-road terrain, so I hand Arrma that. I mean, they work really well, but then again, so do buggy tires. They have a really nice tread pattern. They just look kind of funny in my opinion. That's why I'm going to be bolting on some Shockwaves and showing you how that works out. So let me get into under the hood changes that I'm going to be making to this truck that again apply to this or the V4 Talion, and then I'll get into actually doing the work and showing you how that works out. So I'm going to take the top off here. The very first thing that I noticed, and I was not too surprised at, is how much dirt the rear arms collect. All right, this was just from a few minutes outside in the grass and dirt, and it just got caked. So any 8-scale truck or buggy is going to have enough power to kick up lots of debris, and it just gets all over the rear arms, the drive shafts, turnbuckles, the shocks. It's a big mess. So I'm going to be using RPM's upgrade for this truck, which is right here. RPM mudguards for the Creighton Talion Outcast. Now, these only work with RPM's own arms, so I did indeed get those as well. I'm going to show those to you. These are RPM's rear arms. So there you see the part number, 81402. Now, at first I was a little upset that the RPM mudguards didn't work with the stock arms, but then I noticed another issue with these arms. They have a lot of flex. Let's see if I can show you that. You see that? Just with my hand, I'm able to, I'm going to pull off some of this dirt. It's blocking me. I can flex that in my hand, just like that. I'm flexing that arm, and what's interesting is you actually can't flex the front quite as much. There's very little flex in the front arms, so I don't think it's quite as necessary, and that's because you have an upper and lower arm, and it runs on a pillow ball system, right? The front uses a pillow ball system, so it can use 2 solid plastic arms. The rear has a rear turnbuckle, right? So that does not provide any stability whatsoever. It's all relying on this. And I can really flex that in my hand. That's all flex. That's not the truck moving, right? So that's going to affect your handling. That's going to affect your stability and perhaps your durability as well. So I'm going to be going, like I said, with the rear arms from RPM. Now, another obvious upgrade for any truck or truggy or really any buggy, you'll notice I have it on my 8-scale buggy too, is a front bumper. So I am going for RPM's front bumper here. part number 81472. This, of course, will fit a bunch of vehicles. It actually says Creighton and the Durango DEX8T, which doesn't exist anymore. It'll work on this. I'll just need to remove the stock Arrma bumper, which really doesn't provide a lot of protection to the shocks, the body, or the front arms when you're out there bashing. Let's see what else we've got that I've noticed is an issue. So on the new Arrma Talion that was just released today, Arrma added a tower-to-tower brace, right, going from, say, here to here. Honestly, for bashing, there's a better solution than a tower-to-tower brace, because when you have an impact on your front end and the front suspension mount is impacted, that's going to transfer the impact to the rear, and then what you could end up with is two bent suspension mounts, shock mounts. So that's not really ideal. And so what I'm going to be going with is stronger aluminum chassis braces. And these are going to be coming from, these are from Hot Racing. So this is the Hot Racing. You can see the part number there, AON28CTO1. This is the front brace. So it's going to be mounted in like this. And I also have the rear brace. And you know, if you look at how a truggy is designed, there's a weak point right there. Right there in the chassis. That's a weak point. Arrma actually talks about how its chassis curves up on the edges for additional stability. Let me see if I can show you that. So Arrma makes a big deal about how it has a curved chassis that provides a little bit more rigidity to bending. But notice that the curve is only in the middle of the chassis. You see that curve right there? It doesn't extend out to the rear tail or even the front. And those are going to be your two weak points in a truck like this, right? So if you get a serious impact, I'm not actually that worried about the middle of the chassis bending. I'm worried about right here, boom, bending it there. Or you land hard on your tail, boom, you're going to bend this part of the chassis. Now a tower-to-tower brace can help with that, but I believe that these Hot Racing aluminum braces are going to help up front and in the rear. These are just plastic composite. So we'll see how that works. They should be easy to bolt on. The last thing I'm going to show you is another upgrade that Arrma still hasn't made to its V4 Talion, and that is the servo mount. Let's see if I can show you the issue here. All right, pay close attention here. Look at the back of the servo right here. What you're going to see is the servo is actually, even with very little movement, the servo is pulling away from the mount. See that? The servo is actually moving. So this plastic mount, this tray, moves back and forth. It's a little bit hard to show you with my fingers here. But it's pretty flexible. It's pretty flexible. You can see that servo is moving. You know, in terms of getting really good steering response, you don't want the servo itself moving. So I'm going to be using a Hot Racing servo brace made of aluminum, which hopefully will alleviate all the movement we see in that servo, even under very easy conditions. Sitting here on the table, it's moving. All right, just now think about when you're out there going 35 miles an hour, that servo is going to be pulling itself all over the place. All right, there it is again. It's moving in that mount. All right, I'm going to shut it down here. So those are all the upgrades I'm going to be making. I'm going to be doing that on camera so you can see what they are. I'm pretty excited to see how it works out. All right, before I get into the disassembly, I want to mention two other things I forgot actually on my parts list. One is really completely aesthetic. I find that this ultra low wing just looks a little funny on a truck, so I got RPM's what they call the just their wing mounts for the original Creighton and Talion. So that's actually going to raise the wing up and bring it out a little bit. I think that should improve the aesthetics a little bit. Unless you're really doing speed runs, this is kind of silly looking. The other thing I actually already have installed, which is RPM's rear skid plate. All right, so right back here, This is just a plastic skid plate, protects the aluminum chassis, and of course after a lot of wear and tear you can replace that plastic part for whatever it is, 10 or 15 bucks, rather than replacing the whole aluminum chassis that could get really scratched up back there. In the front, RPM's bumper is actually going to provide that protection to the front end that the stock bumper doesn't. Alright, so let's get into disassembly.